With us, the political commentator Hannah Bardell, who was an SNP MP for 9 years. Andy McKeever runs a PR company and once worked for the Scottish Conservatives. And Ross Foyer is the General Secretary of the STUC. Thanks all for coming in tonight. Hannah, what did you make of what Lord McConnell had to say about the Peter Murrell situation?
I mean, I'm quite surprised because Lord McConnell is somebody that I've always found to be quite thoughtful and incisive and considered. And from what I can gather, it's a half-baked idea with half the information. Now, I was an MP during those 9 years when we were the third largest party. We know that the money that was used as short money, as it's called, has to be signed off by the Electoral Commission. It has a completely separate set of accounting processes through that, and you don't get all of the money.
So does it just go to the Westminster Group? It's nothing to do with the party?
It goes to the Westminster
Group. That's what it's been explained to me.
Yes. And what also happens is you're not actually able to get all of the money from the Electoral Commission until you have had your account signed off, until that's been fully scrutinised. So either Lord McConnell doesn't understand that or he's been given the wrong information. And then second to that, the notion that we would have already spent £2 million on a police investigation, which is a forensic investigation, that's pretty much the highest level in the land that you can get, and we would spend more public money, and he's calling for that. It would have more credibility if he had waited till the end of the court process, because there's a lot more information to come out. And I suspect a lot of the questions that people may still have will be answered in the coming days. So for me, unfortunately, it's politically motivated and it will be a waste of public money.
Andy, do you think more public inquiries rather than the police inquiry need to take place?
Look, I think that what Jack McConnell's doing is pretty considered. I don't think you can consider Jack to be a kind of Labour attack dog here. So, I mean, I think his intervention is a pretty reasonable intervention. I think my personal view is that I'm not sure it's going to take us anywhere further than we already are.
Do you think it would just end up in political point scoring?
Well, inevitably, and this is such a politically charged issue, I think inevitably that probably is what would happen. My own view is that as a sort of, with a concerned citizen hat on, the current Scottish Government has got an awful lot of work to do to pull this country back from the problems that it's got just now. And my inclination would be that this might be a distraction for that. And I'm not sure how else it would get to. But I do have to say, though, that I don't think that what Jack has done is illegitimate. And the nature of the public debate this week and the nature of what the press have been doing this week, I think, is entirely legitimate. And I do think that those who are supporting Nicola Sturgeon, who've suggested that there's some illegitimacy to what the media and the public debate have been doing, is also wrong. I mean, two things can be true at once. I don't think we need another inquiry, but I do think that what has been going on this week has been legitimate and fair. Do
you think it's been fair that she's been more on the front pages than Peter Murrell has when she's innocent and he's guilty, or he's admitted guilt?
So I think this is a really important point, actually. So if Victoria Starmer was Chief Executive of the Labour Party and embezzled £400,000 on items, many of which were found on Keir Starmer or in Keir Starmer's house, do you not think that Keir Starmer would be on more front pages than Victoria Starmer? 100% he would.
Because there's a fame factor there.
He's the Prime Minister. Nicola's a former First Minister.
Even if
there's still a fame factor there in that she's the person who's... Now, let me bring Ros in. Ros, do you think there needs to be either some kind of public inquiry, or does the party need to have some kind of inquiry which then reports in public?
Well, I think the people that have been hard done by here are, for the large part, party members, ordinary party members and activists on the ground who've been putting their hard-earned cash in. And I'm actually quite surprised that the SNP itself, to me it's about the SNP's NEC or whatever they have in their structures actually coming together and taking the initiative. If I was in their shoes, I'd be looking at appointing an independent person to come in and do an inquiry. And I'm a bit reticent. There's more information still to come out about this in terms of what actually happened, and there's been a big investigation by the police. We'll get more information in the coming days, and I'm a bit reticent about the idea of using a lot more public money, and a lot of lawyers, frankly, making a lot of money out of something that, actually that party needs to give its own members answers.
I think it's a fair point, and I think my sense of what John wants to see happen is, let's have all the information out in the open in terms of the court case.
Well, he's saying that with the court case, but he doesn't want to have an inquiry.
well, he doesn't want to have a public inquiry or one that's going to cost the public purse, and that's because he believes very strongly.
So do you think that what Ros is saying is that he should have essentially an inquiry which then reports in public of the party's?
I would like to see
the party to decide.
I would like to see the full facts. This was members' money. It's a membership organisation,
Well,
and it's for members to decide. How are you going to see the full facts if you don't have that kind of inquiry and then it reports in public? Well, because we've still got facts to come out from the court process, and I think when that happens, we've got a national council in a few weeks. We've got a conference at the end, towards the end of the year. I have no doubt that SNP members will make their voice heard about what they would like, and John will rightly take time to reflect.
One of your former Westminster colleagues, Tommy Shepherd, said today, secrecy surrounded the finances. Criticism was not encouraged. Questioning was disloyalty. That was under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen those comments and I have a huge amount of respect for Tommy. He's a good friend of mine, but that is not... Now, I wasn't on NEC.
He was.
And he was. However, that is not the characterisation that I would give. I know, from my perspective, whenever I had an issue that I needed to take to the First Minister or anybody in the party, you know, it was heard, people responded. You know, and I think we've got to remember there's a very clear distinction between the Independence Fund that people were raising concerns about, who were challenged because we have found there's been no wrongdoing, and the operational funds, the current account, as if you will, where the embezzlement actually happened.
Andy, what have you made of the way Nicola Sturgeon has handled it over the last week with the book festivals and the big interview at the weekend?
I have no problem at all. I mean, I don't...
Do you think she did it right? Do you think she did the right thing doing the big interview yesterday?
I do, actually, because I think that ultimately she's a public figure and she wants to be a public figure and she wants to remain a public figure. So if you are going to take that position where you are a public figure, it's very difficult to, you know, answer questions about books but not answer questions about this at the same time. So I think it's inevitable that was going to be the case. The thing that I am really concerned about, I have to say, is this rush to misogyny. I mean, I'm really worried about that. Am I sending my girls out to a world where the definition of feminism is to cry misogyny when there's a hump in the road? I'm worried. I think that's morally difficult. I don't think ultimately anything that she's been asked this week is illegitimate or wrong, and I don't, for the reason, the analogy I gave with Keir Starmer earlier, I just think it's really problematic if we rush to say that there's misogynistic behaviour going on this week when I think it's legitimate scrutiny.
No, I do think that women in leadership get treated in a different way, and I don't think that's something that you can deny.
But how is what's
this
happened
world
this week anything to do with the fact that Nicola's...
All I can say is party members must be raging, but I do feel at a human level for Nicola Sturgeon,
so do I,
as a woman, she must be absolutely raging. She has been let down by some of the most important men throughout her life, and it's arguably ruined her whole career and her whole legacy. Does that mean she's not responsible and hasn't made mistakes? No, she has made mistakes, and I think, you know, she's admitted herself with hindsight perhaps that her and her partner shouldn't have been at the head of a party, and I think there's a lot to be taken out of this and learned from this, but at the end of the day, I don't think that you can say misogyny does not exist in our public life.
I didn't say that.
Political narrative.
I didn't say that.
Well, hang on, we're going to move on from Murrow to Mandelson, because the second tranche of papers has been published today. A lot of them seem to focus on how bad things are for the Prime Minister. For Conservative frontbencher Alex Burghardt, there's still too many gaps in the Mandelson files, though.
On disclosure, although we have a huge number of documents, it is clear that very many are missing. Some have been withheld, some have been lost, and it's clear that some have probably been destroyed. Because of the approach the government has taken, however, it is impossible for honourable members to know which documents fall into which category.
Ros, if Murrow is damaging for the SNP, how damaging is Mandelson for Labour?
Massively damaging. I mean, we're in a bit of a state right now, aren't we? I mean, we've got Mandelson and the Epstein links to Labour. We've got the state of the Murrow stuff going on up here. We had the massive scandals in terms of the Tories with their PPE scandals. We've had the £5 million for Farage that's been unaccounted for. The voters must be just wondering what are we doing here? And that's the tragedy, actually, is for our political system. You know, people need to be able to trust the people that are in charge, and there's been some terrible judgments made.
Andy, the WhatsApp messages that I've looked at today from Scottish MPs, Scottish Labour politicians to Peter Mandelson, there's something fawning about them. You know, you've got Ian Murray congratulating Your Excellency, you've got Douglas Alexander saying you probably don't realise quite how influential you've been. It's all quite fawning to him, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because it goes back 30 years when he was, you know, very genuinely the architect of a bit of a political revolution with New Labour. So there'll be a lot of people who will have previously looked up to him as a political strategist and will want to follow him.
And still do.
Yeah, of course they do. And do you know, there's something there is a lot of similarity with him and Murrell. I actually don't think Murrell is that damaging to the SNP. They've just won a landslide in an election when everybody knew about Murrell. So I'm actually not sure. The similarity, I think, with Murrell and Mandelson is that for Labour and the SNP, for better or worse, they're both baked in now. Everybody knows. So I don't think what comes out now from either is actually going to influence the support for their parties. I think that's done. I
think it's important that we don't, you know, conflate too much embezzlement, which is a very serious crime, with consorting with a paedophile. You know, those are two very different things.
Well, I asked you earlier how damaging the Peter Murrell situation was for the SNP. How damaging is even more Mandelson revelations for Labour?
It is incredibly damaging, and I think Ros makes a very good point about just the general discourse around politics, the disappointment that people are feeling, and the Mandelson stuff. You know, Keir Starmer stood on a platform to be different, to offer change, yet the dogs in the street knew that Mandelson was a wrong-un, that he had consorted with a paedophile even after he'd been in jail, and yet he was
hasn't been charged. He's denying that he's done anything wrong.
Yeah, but we know he gave information, you know, private and confidential information about government contracts to business contacts. And let's not forget, at the heart of this, there were women who were abused by Epstein. What does it say that we've got somebody so powerful that even though he's consorted with somebody who's a convicted paedophile, he still gets the highest job, diplomatic job in the land, to represent the UK and the US? It's woeful.
And where does it all leave Starmer? Because we've been talking about Starmer hanging on, and he's still hanging on.
Yeah, because there's nobody else that is felt as good enough in the wings ready to go. Wes Streeting doesn't want to put his, you know, it's like the hokey cokey, you know, he doesn't want to put his whole self in. Andy Burnham's standing. Andy Burnham's a really attractive character for many people, but what if he loses that by-election?
Well, there are a number of candidates in the by-election. We'll put the names of them up on the screen just for fairness and parity, just as I move on from all this political murkiness, and let's brighten things up by looking at the football. When did we last see that in Scotland? Scotland's squad flew out to America yesterday after a great weekend win. Hannah, how excited are you getting?
Very excited. Almost as excited as I was when the women made it to the World Cup in France, and that was the last time that I was that excited. But
you were talking about boycotting it the last time you were on.
Well, I was making the point that there was a risk.
You're not going to boycott
and it would be, well, no, because, you know, thankfully Trump didn't invade Greenland. But you know, it's incredibly exciting. It's been a very long time since the men were in a World Cup, and you know, I think one of the best teams that we've seen in a generation.
Andy, you are what I would think Off the Ball would describe as a nervous Nelly.
Well, yes. I mean, I was 18 the last time we got to World Cup, and I had been watching World Cups all my young life and presuming we would just always get to them, and obviously it's been quite a long time since that happened. I love World Cups, I love watching World Cups, and the games I'm utterly looking least forward to watching are obviously the Scotland games, because I'm just very nervous about what's going to happen.
And you're concerned though, Ros, about the accessibility, the cost and the things like that, as well as the rest of it.
I mean, I was in Paris in the last time we were in the World Cup, and it seemed like the whole of Scotland was there, but you know, there are so many people that just, it's out of their league to be able to afford to go to the US and enjoy this World Cup with ticket prices, accommodation and everything else. So a couple of shout outs I want to give. One for all the hospitality workers that will be serving people in the bars.
Do you know what? They can all watch it on STV, hopefully, come the time. Thanks for joining us in Scotland Tonight. That's all from Scotland Tonight. Ewan Petrie will be here tomorrow. Until then, residents in Inverness say they've been driven to drastic measures because of a destructive escaped pet parakeet which keeps pecking the rubber off their cars. Here's one last thing.
This is the first one, Mr. Snake. So we put him in the front of the dashboard, and we've got another one on the other side with the eyes facing out. He's not bitten anything since you put the snakes up. The other solution that's been tried down there is peppermint oil. peppermint oil along the rubber. They don't like the peppermint oil.